Okay. So Annie Zaleski, welcome to The Way Magazine Online.
Thank you.
And very happy to meet you in virtual reality. And we are far away, but we got something in common, right? Because we both love Duran Duran.
Absolutely.
And you just wrote a book about RIO, their second album from almost 40 years ago.
That's just nuts. Yes. Turns 39 this year. Crazy.
So how did you come up with the idea of writing something so specific about such a huge band?
So there's this book series called 33 and a Third. And the whole premise is that each book is a deep dive, a deep research dive into one record album. And so I have wanted to write about RIO since literally the late 2000s. I've pitched the book. Basically, how you get to be a part of the series is there's a proposal process. So you have to fill out, put together like basically, it's almost like a job interview. You have to put together a whole application. So I've been pitching it since 2007. And I finally wrote the right, basically the right cover letter. And I basically finally connected.
Did you in any way connect to the band and make them aware that you were writing something so specific and so in depth about such a huge, important milestone of their career?
So I didn't reach out until after I found out basically I got the, I was accepted. Basically it's one of those things where like, it's almost like you don't want to count your chickens before you hatch, because you would seem terrible if you reached out to the band and say, hey, I'm pitching this, if you don't get it, you'd feel really disappointed. So yeah, but after I found out the proposal was taken, they were, I got connected to their management, and that was, basically one of my very first emails.
So, Annie, what is the input of the band in your publication?
So I ended up interviewing John Taylor, Roger Taylor, and Nick Rhodes. And then I also got in touch with Andy Taylor. And I did Zoom and phone interviews with them, just to kind of reminisce about the album. I had interviewed John and Nick previously in past years. And, I asked them about the music. I asked them about what they remembered. I asked a little bit about the music videos. I asked a little bit about the fame. I really wanted to get their voices and perspective as kind of the first thing I had for the book to kind of frame and ground the narrative.
So obviously they've been doing, their recording career has lasted for 4 decades, but I think that as much time went by, that album in particular became such a huge influence on many other bands and on all of us, because probably with the right distance, everybody figured out that that was in a sort of way their pinnacle of their writing abilities, of their playing abilities. And that doesn't really happen when you are 20 something. Is that something strange? I mean, you write about music, so you know that, but is that something about the uniqueness of RIO?
I think that does have something to do with it. When I was doing research, you're right. It was a reminder of just how young they were. I was almost shocked to be like, that's right. They were like very early 20s. Nick Rhodes was 19. I think when musicians are that age, they're less self-conscious maybe than when they get older. And so, they're just kind of, they're all together and they're kind of earlier in their career and they're very confident and they're just doing it. They're just they're writing songs and they're following their muse and they're going with their instincts. And I think every member of Duran Duran at that point was just really, everybody was kind of moving toward the same goal. Everybody just had, was firing on all cylinders. They all, were at the peak of their songwriting game and they were at their peak at their performance game. Like it's really a marvel though, honestly, in hindsight that, because not every band releases a record like RIO in their career. And, Duran Duran managed to do it, less than 2 years of being in a band. I mean, it's incredible, honestly, when you actually kind of, say these things out loud.
Did you point out these issues with them?
No. So this book was basically focused on the music. I think that it's a lot of the tabloid issues and, the disagreements and band lineup changes have been covered pretty extensively elsewhere. And so my goal with the book was really to focus on the music and to focus on why this record has really resonated with people.
Great. And so have you got the actual book with you now?
I do. I can show it up. I just
Yeah,
got copies.
that's
Yay.
very nice.
It's very
Very, so
cool.
you use the purple, the real purple.
Yes, it was actually very cool. My book publisher sent over a PDF with 3 choices and they were like, which do you like for the cover? And so I took the PDF and asked some friends of mine who are big fans and asked my husband who's a fan. They're like, what do you think is best? And they were all like, yes, yes, that purple. And so I'm very pleased how it looks. It looks really good.
So, Annie, this must be like the very first book about a specific Duran Duran record ever released. And we are very happy here at the Way magazine promoting this. So can you tell us, can you share with us how you organized the storytelling of the book?
So, I mean, like I said, I started off interviewing the band. And so that was sort of the grounding, sort of force of everything. What I kind of did at the beginning is I gave a little, like a very, very brief kind of, bio on the band, because I think there's a lot of people who, know RIO, know the songs, but honestly might not know how the band kind of came together. So I gave a little bit of kind of biographical information. I kind of set up RIO by talking about their first record, which came out, less than a year before RIO came out. So I kind of talked about how the first record kind of really set the stage for RIO. Then I went into a very, very extensive several sections talking about how these album came together songwriting wise and then in the studio. And so that ended up being, I think, at least a third of the book, if not a little bit more. And then from there, I talked a lot about the music videos and I talked about them filming the music videos. I talked about how MTV had such a big impact on them in America. And I also talked about Hungry Like the Wolf and how it took a little bit of time in America to become a hit. And what really happened is that Duran Duran was immediately popular in like the US and in the UK and Australia, but it took a little bit longer in the US. But once they became massively popular in the US, it was like a domino. I mean, they just have stayed popular around the world since.
That's very interesting of you to say that, that the very first album is connected in a way to RIO. And also there was a clarification that I made the other day when I was watching the classic album series about RIO on the Italian TV. That is something very interesting to see. And I was thinking, oh God, they obviously I know what I'm talking about. So I know the songs and they had, things like the chauffeur or RIO itself saved up from the first album to the second because they were all written at the same time. Did you find out something more about this? Why did they not include things that were already there in the first album and then metamorphed into some of the biggest hit singles of their career the year after?
I think, one of the things Nick Rhodes told me was that, the reason why, RIO kind of turned out the way it did, and is that they never did stop writing, that it was really like, they were touring and they did their, the first record in 1981, and they just kept working. And so RIO kind of came out of that. I think I can't speak specifically, but I really think it's just a matter of timing. I mean, you hear about this a lot with bands that they have songs that they have, written or they have lyrics they have written and they're, that they sit around for a while and it takes the perfect timing for them to say, yes, let's try this song now. Yes, I think we have an idea. It's like being a writer and having writer's block. You could have something and you could be sitting there, working on something and you're just like, oh, I can't get it. But then if you go take a walk or take a shower or something, you come back, you're like, aha, I get it. And I suspect it's probably something like that. The chauffeur, like at that classic albums is one of my favorites. It's just so amazing. And, I think the chauffeur, Nick had his idea to make it all electronic. And so that was sort of, he found the inspiration that, he was, Simon's lyrics were the inspiration. And then he was like, let's do something else. And so the timing was just right.
Yeah, that song in particular was the first one which had the double, the double version, because they also released the acoustic version on a B-side. And that shows in a way, how versatile they used to be.
I mean, I think, one of the things that also shows the versatility, I think, is just when you look over the years, they've changed up the way they play some of the songs. Like if you look on different tours, Hungry Like the Wolf has been, they did a performance on MTV in the 90s that was kind of like Bowie glam like, they did one that was a little more mystical and a little bit more acoustic in the 90s. They did some that was maybe a little more kind of funky in the late 80s. They've always been sort of, the song. And I've always said that when you're a musician and you have the bones of a song that are just so strong, you can kind of, mold it in different ways. And I think that really speaks to that because, yeah, I mean, they just, it's all of those songs were so good, they could have gone in many different directions.
Good. So, Annie, obviously, as it happens with most of the iconic albums in the history of pop, every single detail of these albums are very much discussed. And I remember, reading about their dissatisfaction at the first place when Hold Back the Rain was released. I mean, there were some issues about synthesizer and programming. And also, I remember some of the old UK reviews that said, the last two songs of the album are the very high and the very low, like the high being Save a Prayer and the low being The Chauffeur. That shows that, even things like the RIO album were not well received universally when they were released.
Yeah, that is completely true. It was, one of the things I did with research is I went back and read a lot of the reviews from the time and interviews from the time. And, it was really interesting, to see how it was perceived, like critics did not like Hungry Like the Wolf. There was a critic who reviewed RIO and one of the, Steve Sutherland, I can't remember which paper he was writing for, but he wrote about it for one of the British papers and gave RIO a really good review. And a couple of weeks later, I guess he wrote a feature on the band and said that, he was kind of getting, made fun of or mocked in the office because he, liked Duran Duran. And I think that is really telling that people at the time, they didn't like Simon's lyrics. I saw some pretty savage, critical reviews of that. And in America too. I mean, there's tons of reviews of Duran Duran's early where it's very mean, honestly. And I think we wouldn't necessarily see that today, but it's like people took it very personally that they didn't like Duran Duran's music and they took it out on the band members. It was, I think if a lot of people read that stuff today, they'd be very shocked because it is very, very different from how things are perceived now.
Don't you think, Annie, that the way this record in particular has gone through the skin, underneath the skin, as you say in English, to many different, artists, musicians all over the world is very, very surprising.
It's very surprising at the diverse genres. And because I think you're completely right. When I was researching and looking up different interviews with musicians who said, oh, I love Duran Duran, I'm a big fan. You had guys who were in hair metal bands. You had guys who were in nu metal bands. You had people who were in Britpop bands. You had grunge bands. You had, the kind of, people like the Killers who were just, great electronic rock bands. You have.
And Nirvana had, their
Absolutely.
rendition of RIO.
Absolutely, which was just like so gloriously sloppy. And then Foo Fighters tried to play Duran Duran songs later, and Dave Grohl was like, "No, these are too difficult. I can't play them." It's really incredible just how much the band has really, and like, I just really influenced so many people and people you'd think, and then people you'd be very surprised by. And I mean, I think that's a testament to the band's greatness, is that there's so many people that just love the band.
So, Annie, we're so looking forward to reading your book. And I have to say that, the whole talk about the looks and the videos, especially for RIO, in the years has, in a way, been predominant over the music, over the development of the songwriting. And so that is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you.
And, and that's one of the things as a fan that's always bugged me because, obviously no one is going to disagree that their videos are amazing. And, their suits that they would wear and photos are beautiful. And the band themselves are very, very photogenic. But, They had that element, but they also were such great musicians, and they really knew how to balance everything. They understood that the visual side informed the musical side and vice versa. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why they became so popular. They were just really, really savvy about combining those two. But yeah, I've always been just such a fan of the music, and that's why I wanted to, write a book that was saying, this is great. I want people to respect this and the band.
Great. And don't you even think about the chart positions that the Rio single, for example, one of the most iconic songs of Duran Duran, was sort of like top 10, not even top 5, but then it turned out into this mega symbol of the 80s, and nobody could have predicted that.
No, and I think that does have a lot to do with the video. I mean, that shot where they're on the boat and Simon is at the front and the wind is blowing his hair back. I mean, I feel like that, you see that on TV commercials. If they are going to, doing 80s compilations, they're going to show that image, and I think because it was so carefree, and it was so hopeful and it was so optimistic. I mean, that song in general is just, that reflected their excitement of touring and seeing the world, and I think I think that's so relatable to a lot of people, and I think in the 80s too, there was that optimism as well, just kind of, culturally, it started, that was new wave, new wave, was Duran Duran were called futurists, which meant something so different than I think it does now. But there was that whole thing, they were forward looking. So yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that.
It's a shame that Colnthurston, the producer of the record, he's no longer with us. So he could have probably given you, some insights about that. But how did you cope with this absence? Did you talk to other people involved in the recording of the record?
The engineer, oddly enough, is named Renate, and she's very hard to find. She married Elton John in the 80s, and they had a pretty high profile divorce. And I think because of that, I think she lives in Germany now, but I tried to find her and I couldn't find her. And I was kind of bummed about that, because I really wanted to talk to her, because she did a lot of stuff, I believe, with the chauffeur as well, with Nick. And I would have loved to just kind of pick her brain about being in the studio too. I did talk to Andy Hamilton, who did the Rio solo. And he gave some good insights about being in the studio with the band too, and just said how focused they were, and just how, that, he understood totally why everything, they were successful, because they just really knew what they were doing and what they wanted to go for. But Colnthurston would have been a dream interview. I found a couple interviews with him here or there, nothing that extensive, but I mean, his catalog, I'm a big fan of everything pretty much he did. So I really wish he could have been here.
Okay, so Annie, I would go on talking for hours with you, but
it's very true.
Yeah, but the best way to celebrate Rio, I think, is to put on the needle on and on the record, to to go back to those 9 tracks, exactly as Mark Ronson says, the exact, precise, smart, selected 9 tracks, and to read your book.
I would totally agree with that, and you can flip it over. The book is very long, so you can listen to it a couple times, go through it, and maybe put on headphones for one listen to hear all the little details. Absolutely.
Okay, so thanks for being with us, and good luck for your future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Bye.
Bye.